Coming up on the FSR Sarkfighter podcast, Karen Coleman is a dance instructor, but all of a sudden she couldn't keep up.
I joined a jazzercize class and little ladies were out jazzing me. So I also still continued for a good solid year or two thinking I am just out of shape.
It turns out she wasn't just out of shape.
If it shows up, I feel like sarcoidosis doesn't necessarily spread. I think it just can pop up in a new area and surprise you.
This is the Sarkfighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 129 of the FSR Sarkfighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin, and I want to wish you a happy new year. I am uploading this podcast and recording this portion of the podcast on December 30th, 2024. Right now I'm looking back on an amazing year, lots of accomplishments for me personally, but also for FSR, and I think probably the big highlight was being able to help moderate the discussion in front of the FDA earlier this year, and hope that their knowledge and awareness of sarcoidosis is better than it was before we started. And I got to give a great shout out to all the folks at FSR who worked tirelessly behind the scenes for probably at least a year, getting to the point where we could be there and make that presentation on that day. And so I just really want to say that's certainly the sarcoidosis related highlight of my year as I look back, and let's just hope that it gets some traction and makes a difference for all of us after all the work that was put into that, and the opportunity just to talk directly to the decision makers and make it so sarcoidosis is top of mind for them, because there's so many other diseases out there competing for their attention, and we were able to sit there and talk to them for a whole day, and it's all recorded, and let's hope that some of them are going back and taking a look at what we had to say, and all the people all the volunteers, all the fellow Sark fighters or sarcoidosis warriors, whatever you want to call us, who took the time to be a part of that presentation as well. But I am looking forward to a new year full of, I want to call it adventure and surprises, and I just want to share with you that I'm taking on a bit of a new job here in Roanoke, Virginia, where I work. In addition to continuing to anchor the 6 o'clock news, I'll be doing some fundraising for an organization called Center in the Square. It's a nonprofit in Roanoke, again, where I live, and Center anchors downtown development as it's the home of the Science Museum. There's a playland in there for children called Kids Square. There's an amazing pinball museum where you can go in and for just one price play dozens of pinball machines to your heart's content. And there's also the guy who runs it is a pinball savant, a pinball wizard, if you will, who can fix just about anything that's wrong with any pinball machine. And when you pull those things apart and you look at the inner workings, man, there's a lot going on with that. But yeah, that's there. There's also a 90s style arcade, which is super popular. Same type of deal. You come in, you pay one fee, and you can sit down and blast galaxies to your heart's content. But Center is also home to Mill Mountain Theater. That's the city's preeminent live theater. They do numerous productions every year, some great musicals, just full on theater. Actors come in from New York and around the country and play the lead roles in that. And there are some local actors too, but for the most part, it's high-end theater, and that's located in the building. And Center is basically the landlord to many other arts and cultural organizations that provide low-cost rent and space to organizations, for instance, like the ballet. And so, and the other thing that's I'm stammering a little bit here because it's hard for me to bring this up in context, but I'm a big aquarium nerd. You've heard me mention it here and there, but I actually own, my wife and I do an aquarium maintenance company called Carlin Aquarium Systems. And for 10 years now, we have had the contract to maintain these beautiful, large exhibit-style aquariums in the atrium at Center in the Square. And so for free, you can walk in and look at an 8,000-gallon living reef. You can look at a 400-gallon aquarium with predators, the Amazon. We have another one of similar size with turtles in it. People love the turtles. And then there's a seahorse aquarium and 2 cylinders that are kind of top to floor to ceiling, and they are filled with these beautiful, colorful fish from Africa called African cichlids, and it's all just gorgeous. And that is something that you can come in on a rainy day with your children and walk around the atrium for as long as you want, and not pay a dime, and just take in the fish. And that's how I got involved with Center in the Square years and years ago when we were doing the research, and I was consulting a little bit with the people who really are the high-end aquarium builders and maintainers who came in and established all those aquariums. But they were friends of mine from being in the trade, and I was able to make some introductions. And long way of saying that I'm going to lean into my relationship with Center in the Square starting 2 days from right now when I'm speaking on January 2nd. So I guess that's technically 3 days, but I'm really looking forward to getting into the fundraising part of this nonprofit. And I've been involved with many nonprofits for a long time, board of directors on some local orgs, if you will. But I've never been the primary fundraiser before. And I think that's something that I could do reasonably naturally with my skill set. On the other hand, I would be lying if I didn't tell you I was just a little bit nervous about it. But I am happy that my health has maintained, if you will. My medications are working. My sarcoidosis is it's always there in the background, but it doesn't prevent me from doing most of what I want to do. And so here I am at near retirement age, if you will, and I'm taking on a whole new adventure, and I'm just really hoping that I do well at it. Let's just leave it there. For my own self personally, obviously, but also for the organization, and typically as Center in the Square goes, so goes downtown Roanoke. Years and years ago, it was not a very nice place, and a group came in, established Center in the Square back in the 1970s, and it sort of anchored development all around downtown in terms of shops, boutiques, restaurants, culture, all the things that you would want in a quaint little downtown in a mountain city in Western Virginia. And it kind of started with Center in the Square, which is why they call it that, the Center in the Square. So anyway, I just want to see it continue to do that, to be healthy, and to make the city healthier. Okay. The other thing that I want to share with you right now is, of course, the podcast will continue as normal. And I received an email from Kalila Cohen, who is the Health Equity Programs Consultant for FSR. This is really great news when it comes to participation in clinical trials, because FSR has received confirmation from the U.S. Department of Labor ensuring Family and Medical Leave Acts, which people often just refer to as FMLA. So you get FMLA coverage for employees participating in clinical trials. That wasn't always the case, right? But Kalila wrote to me that you might recall during our congressional briefing in 2023, we announced our plans to seek job protections for clinical trial participants, and this is a huge win for us and the work that we've been doing to increase access to trials over the last couple of years. And so she gave me a couple bullet points on this. I'm just going to read it to you. The DOL's clarification states that employees who meet all FMLA requirements may access job-protected leave when participating in clinical trials or caring for someone in a trial. This DOL opinion ensures employees can access leave without fear of risking job assignments, promotions, training opportunities, or health insurance coverage. And there is a news release about it that has more details, and I'll put a link to the news release in the notes with this podcast. But the last bullet point from Kalila is this decision will increase access to clinical trials, therefore expanding treatment options available to patients seeking better options to manage their conditions, which is a long way of saying, look, if we're going to find new therapies to treat sarcoidosis, we got to have clinical trials. You can't have clinical trials without patients who are willing to participate, and they can't participate unless they have assurance that everything will be fine at work. And this legislation should, unless you have some bad actors out there who are employers, it should make those employees feel much more comfortable if they want to take on something like that. Okay, so great news, another win for FSR, and thank you, Kalila. And Kalila, I anticipate, will be coming on the podcast to talk more about this probably in the first quarter of 2025. All right. Now, I also promised on the last episode I'd give you an update on Kaylee Steyer's New York Marathon. She joined me along with her husband, Mark, who you may remember wrote and performs the theme song for this podcast called Zombie. And they joined me in episode 118 back in July. Mark wanted to give us a health update, and he's been fighting this. He just cannot get sarcoidosis to stay at bay, so he's been in a struggle with it, and he shared that. But they also talked about Kaylee, who was one of the people that FSR picked to run the New York Marathon. They get a limited number of spots. I want to say about 5, might be 6, but I think it's about 5. You have to apply, and Kaylee was one of the people who was picked to run the marathon and raise money for FSR. And so Mark wrote to me in November with an update. He says the marathon went really well. The weather was great, and Kaylee finished in 4 hours and 40-ish minutes. He says, unfortunately, it was her slowest marathon time by almost a full hour. I'm so sorry, Kaylee. He said, but in my opinion, the structure of the New York City Marathon doesn't set you up for success in that regard. Now listen to what she had to do. He writes, she was up at 4 a.m. getting ready so she could be on the train to the ferry by 5:30. Then it's 40 minutes on the train. You wait at the ferry terminal, a half hour or so on the ferry, and then a few hours on Staten Island before you actually start to get running. He said, and then the first few kilometers, because he's in Canada, so I would have said miles, but he says KMs, you're shoulder to shoulder with a few thousand other runners on the Brooklyn Bridge, which is all a steep incline, and it's a tough way to start the race. And he says, I think all the crowds cheering was actually hard, too, because you get an adrenaline boost in the first part of the race. Maybe you push your pace a little bit, and then when you start to tire, Kaylee said that a switch in her head changed how she processed the cheering, going from an energy boost to an energy suck. Now, that's interesting. I'll share my marathon experience with you in just a second. But first of all, Mark continues, all in all, she finished and enjoyed the race as much as she could, but she was a little disappointed with her time. He said, I tried to tell her that she did great, and this being her first major marathon wasn't about the time, but you know how that goes. It's really hard to console somebody when they are seeking a specific time. And Kaylee, I think, had run 2 other marathons prior to this, both of them smaller races, I believe in Canada, where you show up and the gun goes off and you're running, right? And it's just and there's fewer people in the field and you can just kind of do your own thing. And that is not the case when you are in these major events like New York. I've never run New York, but I have run Boston. And it's the same type of thing. You go and you sit in Hopkinton for several hours waiting for the race to start, and then you're all in corrals. And when you start the race, you're just shoulder to shoulder with people, and you can't really do your own thing. But at some level, neither can they. So you're just kind of there hoping for a good experience. But Mark said that he was able to dash from cheer zone to cheer zone. He actually got on the train. He said he had to run a little bit more than he was used to and missed Kaylee at mile 7, but caught her for a sideline smooch at mile 17 and then made it to the finish in order to see her cross the line. And he said aside from the race, they got to see Hamilton on Broadway while they were in New York. They went to some museums, the 9/11 Memorial. They were in Times Square. They got some amazing food. And he said, I'd love to go to New York City again, but I'd be happy to wait a few years. It's kind of how I am with New York. My wife loves it. I'm actually going to New York to see a show coming up in I guess it's April of 2025, and I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun. We're going with two of my sons and their wives, so that'll be fun. And Mark also said that his most recent test results came back positive, which means a positive result, I'm assuming, not positive for sarcoidosis. He says, I've continued improving on the mental health front, and he's followed through on some of his work-related changes, and his goal for this winter is he wants to lose 50 pounds. He says that'll have a huge impact on my health, physical and mental. So that is my update. I promised you that, and thanks again to Kaylee. I did look up their fundraising through FSR on their KISS page, and they are showing right now $5,876.71 raised. I think their target was $3,500. So wow, that's an amazing total, guys. Thank you so much, Kaylee. Thank you for all your hard work and your training and for everything you did the day of the race. And let's hope it was worth it for you. It certainly, on the financial side, was worth it for FSR. And as far as I know, that program continues. And if you're a runner thinking about being a runner, you can go to the FSR website. I don't know the exact address, but there will be a way that you can apply to tell your story, your sarcoidosis-related story. Either you're a patient, you're a physician, you're a researcher, or you're a family member, in Kaylee's case, of somebody with sarcoidosis, and you want to go out and do some fundraising, and they maybe will slot you in there. Okay, so great job, guys, and I love that program. Now, while I'm talking about support for FSR, please don't forget that it is still the season of giving, as we discussed in the previous episode when Jennifer Bulander and Kathy Davis joined me to talk about all the successes FSR has seen in this past year and all they have planned for the future. So if you want to fight SARC, the best thing you can do is support FSR with a donation. Okay, coming up, my conversation with Karen Coleman, who is new to the fight against sarcoidosis. She shares her story coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. Joining me now is Karen Coleman. And Karen, you have not been diagnosed for very long. Welcome to our sad community here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
So when did you first start feeling like something was awry?
I think that's a tricky question for me because if I go back a couple of years, I would take hikes with the family and be in the back, and I didn't really feel I belonged in the back. And so I had no idea. I just thought it was aging, and I'm early 50s. So I just thought it was part of like, oh, it must be perimenopausal, or I'm just out of shape. And so I didn't really have a clue until, later I had symptoms.
Okay, once again, folks who are regular listeners, we have an active person, right? So you family hikes. What else do you do, like outdoorsy or anything?
Not necessarily outdoorsy, but I grew up as a dancer, and so as a hobby, I teach dance. So
Okay,
once or twice a week, I would go into the studio and teach, and would be so winded, and it would be so hard to teach and dance at the same time. But I had no idea that this was a symptom. I just thought I'm getting old and I need to work out more, which I started doing. Like
right.
I joined a jazzercise class, and little ladies were out jazzing me. So I also still continued for a good solid year or two thinking I am just out of shape, but I'm not. Like I'm not out of shape. But anyway,
You're
that's
not out of shape, but you couldn't keep up.
right, right. I mean, now I'm out of shape after some prednisone, but yes, I was not out of shape. Like I was pretty fit person. So
Yeah, wow. So your family is, you said you have college age kids?
right. I've got a daughter graduating in May. I've got a freshman in college, and then I have currently a junior in high school. And so, yeah, we take trips and we would book hikes and we would, do all these things. And boy, me getting to the top of any sort of hike or mountain was almost embarrassing. They
Right.
would they would just kind of roll their eyes, and I would be really struggling. And then if you add it's hot outside, I'm like, I'm not going to make it.
Oh, that's awful. And and where do you live?
San Diego.
San Diego. Okay. And it's just beautiful in San Diego all the time. It
It
seems like you
it
ought to
is
be able to just go do what you want.
it is really pretty. On a bad day it's in the 60s, and on a good day it's, high 70s. So it's really pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you decide, okay, it's not any of these other issues, there's something more serious going on with me?
So for me, I had 2 rounds of pneumonia, like atypical pneumonia, 1 year apart, almost to the day. And so I just kind of randomly said to my primary care physician at a physical, I'm in this jazzercise class and everyone is out working me. And it's not that I'm competitive, but I just kind of thought it seemed weird that after multiple years in this exercise class and the old school version of jazzercise, I don't know what I pictured, but it's actually a really aerobic weightlifting class. Like it's great. Um, and so he kind of rolled his eyes and giggled and said, "Maybe you have asthma. Let's just do a CT scans, and we won't find anything. Like I expect to find nothing." And so then, a couple days later, I got a message in the portal, or maybe it was even that day, that said, "Hey, we're going to send you to a pulmonologist. Um, we see something not sinister-ish on your X-ray, like on your CT scan," and that kind of slowly got the ball rolling.
So not sinister. That's a good way
Yeah.
of putting it. Um, Although I don't know what they were seeing there, because I would say that anytime you have sarcoidosis, it is sinister. But
Um, I think the radiologist did a good job of saying it looks like inflammatory issues. It was a very, very specific radiology report, I guess if that's how you say it, where it was, suspected hypersensitivity, something like that, where they just, nowhere did they use the word cancer yet, or any of those kind of things. They just kind of thought it was like an inflammatory, you know, indication.
okay, inflammatory indications. So let's progress here a little bit, because at some point they had to get from wow, this looks suspect to this is sarcoidosis. What was that path?
I mean, it took a long time because I met with my first pulmonologist. I had just had pneumonia. The day I finished my antibiotics, I tested positive for COVID. So it was just that was the second round of pneumonia. So he sort of thought, we're going to do a CT scan in 2 months. This is all going to go away. Yeah, I can't possibly read this CT scan because look what you came out of. And so we waited. I think they put me on a steroid inhaler, which I hated. So that lasted, a couple weeks. And then I came back for a CT scan. And now I was starting to get a second opinion because he had blown me off in such a weird way. And I wasn't convinced. Um, and then the second CT scan showed up again with no improvement. And I had now met a second doctor who went down like a ton of blood work and thought it was, they kept asking, do I work in a movie theater and make popcorn? Like over and over again, do I work in a movie theater and I make popcorn? And I've never worked in a movie theater. I don't work in a movie theater and make popcorn. And so they thought I had inhaled something. Did you live in Utah? Did you like all this? Is it a fungal infection or tuberculosis? Like, because we had been in Spain when I got sick. And so they were trying to figure out like what was going on. And again, do nothing. And let's do another CT scan in like 3 months. So I don't really honestly know how many CT scans I've had in a year, but I think it could be 6 or 7, but maybe more. So yeah, slowly. And then, for him, he sent me to someone who did a biopsy eventually. And then within like days, I got a phone call, come in, this is what we think you have. And then it turned into, it was a confusing appointment because he's very experienced and older. And at the end of it, he said, it's not progressing and you don't need medication. But the biopsy doctor had said, this is significantly progressing from your last CT scan. You need a biopsy right away. And if it's stage 2 sarcoidosis, like we think it is, you need to go on prednisone. And so I knew that in the back of my mind. The younger biopsy doctor he's a lung pulmonologist, what they call him the rock star in San Diego. And so I knew he had said that. And then my current pulmonologist in the same office had said, you need nothing. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going to need a third opinion, which I then I made a phone call to the office, asked for the nurse, can I set up a Zoom meeting with this doctor, the biopsy doctor? He immediately, jumped in a couple days later and said, I told him like, I'm getting mixed, suggestions here. Don't take medicine. Like, I just think I need a different pulmonologist. I didn't want to throw him under the bus. I just wanted to get a third opinion. And I'm now with the third pulmonologist who is young and feisty. And he said it was a non-issue issue. And she turned around and said, this is absolutely an issue and we're going to handle it. And and started with prednisone, a lot of prednisone. So
How
that's
much? How much? How many milligrams?
it was 30 for like a month. I'm 5'2". I'm like a
Uh,
little person. So it started at 30 for a month and then we went down to 25. I started coughing again, so we went back to 30. And so it took about 5 months to like wean off everything. And then I started coughing and she said, go back to 10. And I said, no.
oh, you
I mean,
said no.
I said no. I hated the prednisone. I thought the side effects were awful. I think everyone agrees the side effects are awful. I had weird side effects. I had tremors. They sent me to a neurologist. Um, I, I had hormonal side effects. I thought you have got to be kidding. I'm 52. I don't deserve this. Yeah, so I had crazy side effects that were not typical of steroid side effects, acne, like just you name it. I was like, weight gain. All of a sudden, kind of, I really didn't gain weight for the first 3 months. And then all of a sudden, I just my face was fat. Like I'm done. It wasn't you don't quit because it's the weight gain, but when you add it with all the other side effects, mentally, one of my daughters asked when I was driving if I had road rage. So that was awkward.
Right. Well, I was just going to ask you, how was your irritability during that time?
I thought I was doing a pretty darn good job of being peppy and upbeat, like my normal self.
Yeah.
But she just I don't know what I said about the car in front of us, but apparently it was not nice. And she did. She goes, Mom, do you have road rage? And I'm like, no, of course I don't have road rage, but he needs to move, or whatever. But I do notice I'm off it and I giggle more. I've noticed that I like laugh more, which I
Uh-huh.
didn't realize I wasn't doing during those 5 months. I think I was more serious, I guess. Maybe we should interview my husband and get the real scoop.
You know, I love people have heard me tell this story on the podcast before, but when I was on 80 milligrams,
That
and
seems like a lot.
at work they were calling me Honest John because I just let people have it as I told them like no filter. I just told them
Right,
exactly what I thought.
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, some
I
of
mean,
my coworkers thought it was funny because I was saying what they'd been afraid to say for a long time to some people. But for the people who were on the receiving end, it wasn't pleasant, I'm sure. So
right.
it is just awful. It is.
Right. For
Yeah.
me, there are passive aggressive people and aggressive people, and I would never put myself in the passive aggressive side on a regular day. I'm pretty blunt about like, wow, I'm just pretty honest about what's happening and how I feel about it. I mean, my kids probably would prefer I shut that down. But yeah, I've always said what I thought. But I'm sure the steroids brought more of that out. So I should probably apologize to everyone who I was near.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my wife was a saint for having endured that for me for a couple of years. Um, so you said no to the prednisone. Are you taking anything?
They threw me back into an inhaled steroid, which I have yet to open the box. So not really. I have like an albuterol steroid, which I'm going to start using because I've noticed like even getting up the stairs, I'm like, feels like a marathon, in a weird way. But also I feel like I recover very quickly. Um, so yeah, I'm supposed to be on an inhaled steroid in the albuterol. And then I go back again in January for another CT scan because they saw something else on the x-ray. It just feels like every time I walk into a doctor's room, they go, "Oh, I think you should do this," or "Why don't you see the cardiologist?" Or it just feels like I spend a ton of time making appointments and meeting new doctors.
Wow, yeah. And that's troublesome because every doctor wants to inject their own relatively new opinion to your situation, right? As opposed to having one doctor that's kind of tracking it.
Well, I mean, I will say that pulmonologist that I'm currently with is in a private practice here in San Diego. And I've noticed that the private practice doctors I have versus the huge institutions where you send a message in a portal and a different nurse answers every time. For the pulmonologist, it's the doctor responding to every question, which I think is incredible. And I just
Okay.
had no idea that actually could happen.
Hmm.
So she's been, knocking it out of the park. And I think the rest of the doctors are so afraid to do anything. I met a rheumatologist who did nothing. Like he said, oh, he was really young, and I joked that I thought he was going to ask for my autograph. He clearly had doesn't treat anyone with sarcoidosis, and he just said, "Oh, I remember learning about that in medical school." And he did an X-ray of my hands and feet and said, "You don't have arthritis, and so you're good to go." And I thought, oh, okay, well, the pulmonologist wanted me to meet with you. And I just left, and I'll talk to the pulmonologist when I see her again. But that was it for him, which I do have arthritis in my hips. I know that, but I don't know. I don't know how it works. I'm still learning that it might take more than one doctor. And sometimes the seasoned doctors are stronger than the young ones. And sometimes the young ones are stronger than the seasoned. So, it's just that game is unfortunate. I wish you could plug in. I want to see a doctor who's confident with sarcoidosis, who treats people, but maybe there's just not enough of us to have that happen. Like I don't think there's an expert in San Diego. I mean, maybe there is, but there's no clinic that I know of, you know?
Yeah, so the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research has they keep track of where all the clinics are that are, all over the United States, and you find the one that's closest to you, and then you
Right.
go. If your situation is quote unquote mild enough that you feel like it can be handled by this team of doctors that you have, then fine. I live in a small city, for instance, in Western Virginia, but we're still the biggest city on the whole western half of the state. My doctor had maybe six sarcoidosis patients, which in my mind was not enough. So
Right.
people come here to the medical center here from 3 or 4 hours away because we're the biggest thing. But I wind up driving to Cleveland, which is 7 hours away. And people who listen regularly know that the Cleveland Clinic has an excellent sarcoidosis clinic, and I just felt like I needed to be someplace where every patient was a sarcoidosis patient, so they knew what they
Right.
were looking at. And I know, you're in San Diego; it's a long way from there to Cleveland, but there's National Jewish in Denver, and there are some really good sarcoidosis doctors. If you don't find resolution with your current situation, I would suggest that you find somebody whose main thing is sarcoidosis.
Yeah.
But,
No, so far I feel confident that I'm in very good hands. It's just I literally sometimes think, am I the only person you've ever met or treated, or how many are there of us? Or does everyone get the same, you know, dose? Like, does everyone get dosed the same? Or you just wonder. It's interesting. I mean, my
yeah,
sister-in-law is a medical doctor in San Diego, and yeah, I should ask her, like, you know, be truthful. How many people have you ever seen, that you referred pulmonologist to? Because I think it's a small number.
yeah, and there's a lot of people who come on the podcast and they have, six different specialists, right?
Right. Right.
They have a pulmonologist or a rheumatologist usually as a front line, and then if they're having, skin involvement, then they have a dermatologist, and if they've got eye involvement, then there's,
Right. I have all that.
yeah,
But yeah, they've sent me to everyone. Like, get your eyes checked, go to the cardiologist.
right.
Um,
But
you know,
they haven't found anything that hasn't spread.
no, it hasn't spread. The only last CT scan was something was growing that shouldn't have been growing or something. So then I go back
Where? Do they say
in my
where?
lung,
In
in
your
my lung.
lung. Okay.
Yeah,
All
like
right.
a nodule that had changed in size. So now they're watching that. And I think, like, you read like so many CT scans, like my primary care doctor hates CT scans. He just said you're gonna glow in the dark. Um, so, all that radiation. So I always wonder, like, you're giving everybody radiation, and then you wonder why they get cancer later. And I'm wondering, has anybody done the research? Like, that kid had 10 CT scans in a year. It wouldn't be, it just seems counterproductive to do that so many times. There has to be another way, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. So are you currently taking, did I ask you this? Are you currently taking anything to replace the prednisone, or are you taking nothing? Oh,
No, I'm taking,
the inhaler is
yeah,
what you said.
she
Right.
just called in a steroid inhaler, and I always have albuterol with me, which, she says, before you teach dance, like, take two puffs and give it a try.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of stuff. And
So if the prednisone did its job initially, it should have given you back some lung capacity. In theory, it should have shrunk some of the sarcoidosis in your
right.
lungs. So are you breathing better?
Um, I really wouldn't, I don't think I can say I'm breathing better. It feels the same to me.
So you're still getting out jazzercise by the little old ladies?
I had to take a couple months off for like hip issues, but I will go back. And it's interesting for me, if I do something like walk up the stairs or do something unexpected, I'm out of breath. But if I take a jazzercise class, you kind of get to a level of you're out of breath, but you just kind of stay that way. And I'm able to make it through the end. So you would think you just would have to stop. For me anyway, I would have to stop, and I couldn't do it, but I kind of feel that I can make it. And I just don't work out as hard as I would like to work out. Or I look around the room at these women who are in their 70s doing a very good job. And nobody's really looking at each other. I mean, maybe I'm the one who's just judging everyone, but
Uh-huh.
I don't. yeah, I just think I'm always careful because I'm a dance teacher and I don't want to hurt myself or throw my back out because I want to be able to teach my class. But this year I have tiny babies in my dance classes, so it's not like I have to show them a ton of difficult moves. They're young. So that's helpful. But when
Uh-huh.
I was teaching the older kids last year, I was definitely struggling. So
What is your history with dance? I mean, were you doing big productions or anything like that?
I mean, I grew up doing musical theater. I went to college and studied musical theater. Actually, my middle daughter, Taylor, is getting her BFA for musical theater at Indiana. So we're very theater. I drag my husband to every show. We go to New York and see Broadway shows. We're a big musical theater family. Um, so that's the kind of style of dance. Like I teach tap, and it's very theater tap. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would consider myself pretty active. So joining a jazzercise class, which the jazzercise class is at the dance studio I teach at. So I was watching them and thought, that's not jazzercise. That's like a whole nother level of, they're really working out hard with weights and it's very aerobic. And I joined thinking I'm going to kill it. And meanwhile, it killed me.
Oh, wow. Okay, so right now you said you've got a CAT scan coming up in January, so that's about a month from when you and I are speaking. We're speaking right before Christmas here in
Right.
2024. If people are listening to back episodes. So you've got your next scan coming up in January. Then do you have any idea what happens after that?
I know I do a breathing test in January. I do a CT scan in January, and then I meet my pulmonologist right after. So I'm sure I'll have a lot to say. I think the whole reason for this next CT scan was to check on a nodule. So we'll just go from there. And then, you meet the cardiologist every 6 months now, because I think they want to catch if it shows up. I feel like sarcoidosis doesn't necessarily spread. I think it just can pop up in a new area and surprise you.
Yeah, I don't.
So
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it just it could show up on your skin, which it's not spreading, quote
right,
unquote, from your lung. But all of a sudden, and if you go back and listen to back episodes, there's folks who've had it. If it doesn't self-resolve, which it does in about half the cases, but usually it would probably. Well, I don't want to I, other people have said that if it self-resolves, then it doesn't get to the point where you are right now, where you're taking the prednisone. So your doctors
right,
must feel like you're not in that category. But then it can show up in other places. So you kind of got to keep an eye on things. And
right. Well,
that's the
I
scary part.
I did what everyone does, weeks later, I Googled it and I
Yeah.
said, like, well, this most people don't need any treatment and it goes away on its own. And
Right.
she said that's not accurate at all. And then it's unfortunate because we all turn to Google and it just kind of blows it off. And everybody who's listening who's never heard of it would turn to Google and she just said that's not what we see in this office. That's not accurate. This is a long-term condition and we're going to track you and you're going to go on and off medication and it is what it is. And it was just very this is how we do it here.
Well,
So
that sounds like good advice. So that's what you would want to hear from your,
right, right.
yeah.
I think for me, my kids know I have sarcoidosis. None of them have ever Googled it. They don't pay attention to the, shoebox of medications that I've been put on earlier, like, herbal, just you name it, or the inhalers. At the beginning, it felt like, then I got tremors. So the neurologist put me on medication for tremors, but I blamed the steroids for tremors, which getting off the steroids helped the tremors. It was a mess. It was, and the two kids in college and one in high school, so they're all very focused on themselves, which is great. But yeah, they're pretty they're pretty clueless in a good way of like this is not going to. I mean, I know what the doctors have said. Like, I don't think it's just going to magically disappear. And I don't think it magically appeared. If I go back, I can think there were years of me struggling to keep up with the family.
Interesting. You're the dance instructor.
Right. That's what
Right.
made me so mad is my
Right.
husband will like, get up and say, I'm gonna hike Torrey Pines. And I would be at the back, like, needing them to basically pull me as a joke. But sometimes I thought, I'm gonna just turn around and go down the hill. I'll meet you on the other end,
Yeah.
which just doesn't make sense. Like, why would he be able to out exercise me?
Uh-huh.
It didn't make sense. We should both be at the same level, and if not, I should be smoking them all.
Not that you're competitive or anything.
Not that I'm competitive.
Some of us just have that gene, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just who we are, And,
Right.
and I
Well,
would put
yeah.
myself in that category too.
We took a trip like right after the first time I got pneumonia to Mexico, and there was this like lighthouse hike, we signed up for, and there were women that were like cruising up, hundreds of stairs, and I was like taking breaks, and I was trying not to be embarrassing. And it was before I knew, but I'd already had pneumonia once, and I blamed it on the pneumonia from, I had pneumonia the month before, and I thought this must be from the pneumonia. Um, and good Lord, it was such a hard hike. And it was hot, and the rest of the family did just fine. And there were probably 30 or 40 of us on the hike. And, you know, 99% of them did just fine. And I did not. I got to the top and needed to sit and needed water and had to hide while I recovered. So looking back, I probably was still, I probably had it. We just didn't know.
Hmm. Did
And nobody
you
did.
did you go down the rabbit hole that many of us do, trying to figure out the cause of sarcoidosis and all of that?
I mean, if you could blame it on getting sick or a crazy infection. So for me, I host Thanksgiving every year. I got super sick in 2022, I guess, on Thanksgiving. I had a horrible round of pneumonia. I didn't know I had pneumonia. I went a month running around still teaching, but really sick. And then did a virtual appointment with a doctor or a PA, and had a CT, no, I had a chest X-ray, and then of course she was like, you have atypical pneumonia, and I thought, wow, I've been running around for a month with that. And so that kind of felt like it may have opened the door to like have my body overreact if that's the way you do it or get it. um so
Well,
that's
so atypical pneumonia, could it have just been sarcoidosis and they just didn't know what they were looking at?
um It could have been both, right? So I
Yeah.
definitely was sick with a fever at the beginning and was coughing, and it was a nightmare. Um, and I didn't do another chest x-ray after that pneumonia. No one said to do it. I didn't do it. And then the second time I got pneumonia, again over Thanksgiving, um, randomly the PA had said, hey, a month later, go in and get another chest x-ray to make sure it's all cleared. And I almost didn't go because it was kind of 95% cleared. I just had this like allergy cough, I call it. I have dogs. I'm allergic to dogs. So at night I would
Oh,
sit on the
okay.
couch and kind of cough, but wasn't scary. Um, and then I went in, I randomly went in and got a follow-up chest x-ray a month after it because she said that was standard. I don't know if the standards changed because a year before I didn't do it. And then she said, oh, we see a residual like issue in your chest x-ray. If you're not getting better, let us know. And I pretty much was better. So then I had a physical, and I randomly had said, the jazzercise ladies are out jazzing me. And my primary care doctor is the one who then started the like, just get a CT scan and let's see if you have asthma or, something like that.
Got
Maybe
it.
you have asthma.
Yeah. So let me go back to your prednisone for a minute. Did you feel at the worst that you needed to go to counseling or anything like that?
I don't think, no, you mean for like anger issues?
Yeah, exactly. Just like to resolve your day-to-day anxiety and angst.
No, I did not. I know. It wasn't that to me, the side effects of, all of a sudden having tremors, I just thought this needs to stop. Like, and if
Mhm.
I didn't have any tremors going into this, and all of a sudden, like my left hand would shake, my right hand would shake. I knew I strongly believed it was from the prednisone, and the pulmonologist didn't. But
Hmm.
then when I met with the neurologist, he said, well, everybody has, these tiny essential tremors. And did the prednisone make it worse? It's possible. Um, and I basically sent a message to the pulmonologist. I want to wean off this as soon as possible. If I need to try something different, I'll take a different medication. I'll try something else. But at that point, I'd already been on them for a long time. For me, I had a CT scan that showed that the sarcoidosis was improving, but yet there was the nodule that had sprung up or was bigger. So she felt confident I could get off it. First it's like every 2 weeks you drop 5 milligrams. And I said, I'm not going to make it 2 weeks. Yeah, I want to go faster. It was like every 10 days. And then another message, faster. I want off. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you can't just stop. That's the thing.
No,
You can't stop cold
no.
turkey. I mean, because it really messes with the prednisone's doing a lot of other unintended consequences that
Oh, for sure.
your body has to adjust and start making, like, your fight or flight response goes
I mean,
away.
yeah, I then got crazy acne, and my husband is kind and loving and nice. And I remember coming downstairs and he said, like, what's happening with your face? I'm like, I called a dermatologist. And then, of course, I said to her, I'm just got off all this prednisone. Is this a hormone acne? And she was a new dermatologist for me. She said, no, no, no. I don't think so. And sure, a week later, my face is completely clear. There's nothing wrong with my face. I just needed to wait a couple more days. I blame the prednisone on everything, honestly.
Hmm.
Like, I
Hmm.
had the craziest, I needed to call my OBGYN because I was having problems. Like, every weird side effect for me was, almost unacceptable, to the point of where I'm like, I can't leave the house. Like, I help.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did well to get off it as quickly as you could. But unfortunately, right now, that's excuse me, that's first line of defense. And then they're going to talk to you about things like methotrexate and some other some other off-label, because everything for sarcoidosis except for prednisone is pretty much off-label.
Right.
So you hope the prednisone works and knocks everything back to where you can live, but um, if it flares up again, then you're going to be right back where you were, unfortunately.
Yeah. I
Have they
can't.
explained that to you, or is this all new information to
No, pretty new, because when I had said, oh, I'm starting to cough a little more than my regular cough, she offered two more medications, but they were kind of similar to prednisone. When I Googled them, it was like a stronger version of prednisone. And I thought, oh, no,
Yeah,
not,
more steroids, right?
yeah, more steroids.
Yeah.
And it's a no. It's a hard, if I guess for me, if the consequences are you don't take steroids and you just cough a lot, I'll take the coughing as long as it's not dangerous. I would just prefer to cough here and there. It's not, no one would notice. Like, my husband coughs, nobody notices his cough. So for him, it's more allergy or asthma. So if I would just rather cough, and if I'm a little out of breath, I'd rather be out of breath as long as it's not dangerous. Like, to me, having it go to your heart is a problem, right?
Well,
So,
exactly. So the cough is a symptom, right, of
right.
something deeper and that's what I would say you just need to keep in the back of your mind. You go to I sat down next to the first time I went to the Cleveland Clinic. There was a guy next to me, and he was there, and he said, yeah, he just had both lungs replaced, and he
Oh,
was there for a follow up with the doctor. So, it's worst case scenario. I don't want to, you know,
right.
scare you or anything like that.
Right.
But, but that does happen. So it's like, it's not necessarily about the cough. It's about the root cause of the cough. And you're going to know your body by the time you get through with this. So, it's not my job to,
Right.
all I know is what I see and hear a lot, because I'm around it a lot because of the podcast and because I'm doing the volunteer work with FSR. So um, I would just say to be cautious and to listen to the doctors and make sure that they keep doing those scans and tracking it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a lot of scans. And so you have all these different doctors, like the pulmonologist is big on scans, which I understand. Then the primary care doctor I see, every once in a while or once a year for sure. And he'll say, "Oh, you've had so many CT scans, like it's so dangerous." And so you get these different opinions, and then
Yeah.
it's just hard. And then I read you have a higher rate of lymphoma or lung cancer. And I thought, well, isn't that from all the scans? Like, I
Yeah.
don't
It's got to be a measured response, and they got to do, just enough, but not too much, right?
Right. It's even when I now go to the dentist and they do x-rays, I think, oh God, no, no more.
Right, right,
You're
right.
gonna see me from space. That's just what I keep thinking. Like, you're gonna be able to see me from space.
Right,
So it'd be nice to do one a year. Some people do one a year. I want to be that person.
right. Well, the holidays are here, so your kids are home from college. Are you going to be cooking? Are you looking forward to 2025? I mean, what are your immediate and sort of medium long-term plans for how your life is going to go the next few months?
Um, the kids are all home. They all got here within the last like couple of days, which is great. I make sure they don't come home sick. Like everyone had to get back. I said, get your flu vaccine in college, get your COVID vaccine. Don't you dare bring home those things to me. So they're home, they're good. We're leaving to go on a vacation. I have a family member getting married in the Caribbean.
Ooh,
So I know. Uh, and so it was funny. We were on a trip when we found out about it, and my husband goes, "Oh, yeah, we're already out here. Like, do we really have to come back?" And I said, "Well, you don't have to come back, but I'm going," which turned into all five of us are going. So of course, I mean, we wouldn't
uh-huh.
really miss it, but we were it's so we're headed off to the Caribbean for New Year's, and then the kids will go back to school, and I will head back to, doctor's offices and appointments. And I still teach dance, but it's little. They're like 3 to 5 year olds, and they're very cute, and they cough all over me.
Oh,
So there's that, which is, scary. I feel like every cold I get turns into something sinister, which back in the old day, you catch a cold, you get a cold, and no one cares about it. But when nobody really knows that I have this. I've never put it on social media. I probably have five people total, well, five other than my family that know. Um, I think that'll change. So
a little bit.
a little bit. I'll probably share this. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I want to wear a sign that says, "Don't judge how fat I just got," because I had to take a lot of medication.
Right, right. Oh God.
Right?
Same,
Yeah,
Uh,
I buy clothes thinking that's my size and they don't fit, and it's super annoying. I also know I'll lose it, but I do have a family that enjoys ice cream every night, so that's awkward.
yeah,
Um, and they're all tiny. So I want to get back to, feeling better about my size because I've gained probably 10 pounds.
right. On a
Yeah.
5'2" frame, that's,
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
lot. Yeah,
sure.
it feels like a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I'm headed off to wear a bathing suit, so that's not fun.
Right.
Yeah, what I mean, again, who's looking at me, right? We're all going to be looking at the bride. Um, so yeah, I'm hoping 2025 is a smooth, less CT scan kind of year.
All right. Well, good luck to you, and thank you since this is sort of your coming out party, if you will. If you haven't put it on social media, and now you're being interviewed on a podcast, so
Yeah,
um, people are going to know. But at least maybe then you'll have the excuse. It's out there, and like, well, yeah, the sarcoidosis. I put it on my social. It's like
yeah, yeah,
so.
I'll share it. I mean, maybe there's more of us and people just don't know. Maybe they just feel out of shape. And that's really was my telling story. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
So many thanks to Karen for sharing her story, putting herself out there. Let's hope that she moves to the front of that jazzercize class and that the dance instructing she does gets back to her historic levels and that prednisone never makes a return appearance in her life. That's a best case scenario, and let's hope it all comes together. By the way, I want to let you know this is a good time to contact me if you'd like to share your story on the podcast. I am scheduling for 2025 right now, so please contact me via email at carlinagency@gmail.com. I hope you have a great and happy new year, and let's be thankful for the strides that are being made in fighting sarcoidosis. The official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steyer, who is in Alberta, Canada. You can hear Mark's story, the original story that caused him to write that song, the story behind the lyrics, way back in episode 12. I release a new podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, neither my trusty dog Dougal nor Shandy is curled up on the chairs in my office because Mary is home and they're cheating on me once again. I try to be their best friend, but whenever Mary's home, never mind. In the backstory to the founding of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, that's episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Don't forget to follow me on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. I'm also on Peloton as Sarc Fighter. My cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. If you're new here and just trying to figure out what Sarc is, try listening to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart. My story is episode 1. Please send me an email if you'd like to give me a comment or appear on the show, carlinagency@gmail.com. There's a link in the show notes. And until next time, keep fighting.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking.